In the very moment Brian thought he had prepared for his whole life, the atmosphere was shattered by a single sentence. "Don't sign that contract. Your fiancé will destroy you." The sound rang out like a silent death sentence, freezing the golden pen in Brian's hand just inches from the signature line. The luxurious boardroom on the 42nd floor fell into an uncanny silence, every gaze turning toward the door that had just swung open. Standing there was not an investor, not a lawyer, not even a powerful shareholder. It was only Raina, the night janitor, the woman who had silently cleaned every hallway and every desk for months. Yet in her eyes now, there was no trace of the quiet humility of an invisible figure among the elite. Instead, her gaze burned with the fire of someone who had witnessed the truth and dared to challenge an empire of power. Brian's heart pounded, each beat like a hammer against his chest. Around him, people he thought he knew suddenly felt like strangers. Laurel, the woman he was about to call his wife, sat frozen, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her expensive dress. Marcus, his best friend of 2 decades, the partner who had built an empire alongside him, opened his mouth as if to speak, then shut it again. In that golden-paneled room, where every decision was measured in millions of dollars, Raina's words echoed like a bell shattering the artificial silence, an unforeseen warning, yet one powerful enough to make Brian ask the greatest question of his life. Was the success he was about to secure truly a victory, or just a sweet trap leading him to the abyss? The tension in the boardroom grew heavier, as though everyone was waiting for Brian to break the silence. He bent down, picking up the pen that had slipped from his fingers, but his eyes no longer lingered on the contract. Instead, they fixed on Laurel, the woman who had planned a grand wedding with him, the woman who always spoke about the future with a perfect smile. "Darling, don't let yourself be swayed by meaningless words," Laurel spoke, her voice honey-sweet, but with the hidden edge of a blade. "This is 18 months of tireless work. Think of my father. He would be so disappointed if—" Her words faltered abruptly. Brian's pulse spiked. My father? He had never heard Laurel mention her father, except to claim their family ties had been severed long ago. Why now did she speak of him with such familiarity? Brian's gaze shifted to Marcus, his companion through youth, his partner from the days they dreamed of building an empire in a dingy dorm room. Marcus had always been the rational voice, the anchor when Brian faltered. But today his eyes were unsteady, evasive, betraying a flicker of relief. A glance, quick as lightning, passed between Laurel and Marcus, and Brian saw it. In that instant, everything he had trusted began to fracture. "Maybe she's right, Brian," Marcus interjected, his voice deliberately calm. "You're exhausted. Stress can make you imagine dangers that don't exist. Don't let a janitor sow illusions at such a critical moment." Brian's grip on the pen tightened. Such simple words struck like a warning bell. Why would a janitor risk her job, her safety, just to stop him from signing? And why were Laurel and Marcus so quick to dismiss it, as if they were the ones with something to hide? The cold wind seeped through the floor-to-ceiling windows, carrying the distant growl of Lake Michigan. For the first time, Brian saw the glittering high-rise not as a fortress of success, but as a glass cage, one he was about to lock from the inside, led by someone else's hand. The elevator doors closed behind him as Brian stepped into the dim corridor of the 38th floor. No golden panels, no marble, no warm lights here, only pale fluorescent tubes and the faint scent of cleaning agents. A janitor's cart sat abandoned, black trash bags half full. At the end of the hall, Raina sat quietly. The faded uniform made her look smaller than the powerful voice that had shaken the boardroom minutes earlier, but her eyes still burned with unyielding resolve. "You came," Raina said softly, as though even she hadn't expected Brian to actually seek her out. Brian dragged a plastic chair across the break room floor and sat opposite her. No glass walls or chandeliers here, only a scratched table and a humming vending machine. Yet strangely, this space felt truer than any gilded boardroom above. "You made the entire board look at me like I'd lost my mind," Brian began, half reproach, half restrained curiosity. "So tell me, what do you know that I don't?" Raina clutched a battered pen engraved with the words, "For my beautiful Raina, love always, Mama." Her fingers trembled, but her voice did not. 3 weeks ago, while cleaning near Marcus's office, I overheard them, Marcus and Laurel. They discussed how once you signed the contract, they would hold 80% control of Carter Innovations within 6 months. I recorded it, and not just once. Brian's brow furrowed, a chill running down his spine. Laurel, my fiancée? She said it plainly, Raina nodded. She never loved you. She sees you as a lonely man, easy to exploit. And Marcus, her voice broke. Marcus was the one who drafted the entire plan. Ah, Brian said nothing, eyes locked on the cracked phone Raina slid across the table. Then came the voices, Marcus's familiar, smooth tone, but laced with betrayal. Laurel's voice next, sweet as silk, sharp as knives. The recording ended. Only the drone of the air conditioning remained. Brian sat frozen, his palms bleeding where his nails had dug in. Why would you do this? He whispered. You could have stayed silent. You're just a janitor. You'll lose your job, maybe your safety. Raina raised her head. In the harsh fluorescent light, her plain face glowed with a truth beyond adornment. Because once, I lost everything out of fear. I promised my mother on her deathbed that I would never again watch someone be destroyed when I could stop it. Today, that person is you, Brian. For the first time in years, Brian felt a gaze pierce the loneliness that had haunted him since childhood. A silence settled, not the silence of lies, but of truth. The next morning, storm currents pulsed through Carter Innovations. Brian's phone rang relentlessly. Shareholders, partners, investors, all echoing the same message. You're unstable. The company needs steady leadership. This wasn't coincidence. This was war. Inside his office, Laurel lounged in Chanel, calm and immaculate, as though nothing had unraveled. Marcus typed furiously, drafting a special report to the board, documenting Brian's supposed mental instability. Darling, yesterday was just a breeze, Laurel cooed, her voice as sweet as ever, but sharpened by defiance. But investors don't like drama. The more you cling to a janitor's nonsense, the more you tarnish yourself. Marcus added smoothly, Brian, we're brothers, but the board is already considering replacing you. If you don't step aside gracefully, they'll force you. You can keep your shares, but CEO, that may no longer be you. The words struck like iron. Their script was flawless. Brian, the unhinged leader, they, the saviors. Meanwhile, Raina appeared in the lobby, her hands trembling as she passed Brian a folder salvaged from Marcus's office trash. Inside, offshore transfers totaling $20 million siphoned from Carter Innovations. They don't just want control, Raina whispered. They want to bleed this company dry, then leave you to take the fall. Brian's chest tightened. This wasn't just about his reputation anymore. It was about the livelihoods of thousands of employees. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Richard Langford, Laurel's father, CEO of Horizon. Do not resist. If you cooperate, you'll still have a place. If not, we'll make the whole city believe you're insane. Brian looked up. Laurel and Marcus exchanged a glance of calculated triumph. The wall of power was rising. If he didn't fight back, everything would collapse. That morning, Carter Innovations' boardroom was unlike any other meeting before. The directors sat in a semicircle, tense, their eyes on Brian like hunters cornering prey. Laurel sat poised in ivory, serene, confident. Marcus had his laptop open, ready to present proof of Brian's instability. They believed today would crown them rulers. Brian entered, slow but steady, his gaze razor sharp. He carried no contract, only a folder and Raina's battered pen. He tapped it against the table. The sound silenced the room. Before we discuss leadership, Brian said firmly, I want to introduce someone. The doors opened. Raina walked in, not in her janitor's uniform, but in a modest professional suit. Murmurs rippled. Isn't she the cleaner? What's happening? Brian locked eyes with Marcus and Laurel. This is Raina Washington, MBA, Northwestern. 5 years in financial fraud analysis. For 3 months, she has investigated irregularities in this company. Today, she will show you the truth. Raina connected her laptop. Wire transfers, emails, falsified contracts lit up the screen. Her voice was unwavering. Over the last 18 months, over $40 million has been siphoned from Carter Innovations. Here are the signed transfers. CFO Marcus Reed. Here are the falsified contracts approved by Laurel Langford. Lies, a board member shouted. Raina pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. Brian trusts too easily. Once he signs 6 months from now, we'll control 80%. Then Laurel's voice, cold beneath her sweetness. He's not love. He's prey. This ring is just a chain, and he's desperate enough to wear it. Mask fell. Panic flashed across Marcus's pale face. That's doctored. Brian, you know me. Laurel tried to smile, her voice trembling. Darling, it was a joke. You can't really believe. The doors burst open. Federal agents and Detective Hayes entered with warrants. Marcus Reed, Laurel Langford, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and securities manipulation. The click of handcuffs was a gavel of judgment. The board turned to Brian, not as a fallen leader, but as the man who reclaimed truth. Brian faced them, voice steady. Carter Innovations will no longer be a breeding ground for lies. Today we begin again, with transparency, with justice, and with people worthy of trust. Applause erupted, tentative at first, then thunderous. Raina stood by, eyes glistening, clutching her mother's pen. Proof that sometimes it takes one voice of truth to change the world. After the arrests, the flashing cameras, and the chaos, Brian slipped out into the city. Chicago buzzed on, indifferent, but inside him, an old door had closed and a fragile new one opened. That evening, he entered Northwestern Memorial Hospital, room 4237. The air smelled of antiseptic, but the sunset through the small window warmed the space. On the bed lay Noah, Raina's younger brother, frail yet eyes alive. Sketches of the city lay scattered, unfinished but vibrant. You're Brian Carter, right? Noah smiled faintly, offering his hand. The man my sister just saved, and maybe saved herself too. Brian clasped the weak but resolute hand. In that instant, he realized, this boy was the reason Raina had dared to stand against an empire. My sister risked everything for you, Noah continued, his tone steady, far older than his 18 years. Not for money, not for fame, because she saw in you something worth protecting. Brian fell silent. His own childhood had been marked by abandonment, his empire built on the void of a vanished mother. But here, in this simple hospital room, he felt something new, family. Raina entered with a steaming takeout box, pausing at the sight of Brian by Noah's side. Surprise softened into a rare smile. Not for a CEO, but for a man searching for his heart. You didn't have to come, Raina murmured, setting the box down. You've had enough battles. Brian's gaze was steady. I came because I owe thanks, not just for the company, but because you reminded me what truth and courage mean, and because your brother showed me there are dreams greater than profit. The room hushed. The monitor beeped in rhythm, like a drumbeat of beginnings. Raina held her mother's pen tightly. Brian knew his battle was no longer with Laurel or Marcus, but with the wounds inside himself, to learn trust, love, and the courage to stay. Outside, the sunset bathed Chicago in gold. Inside, 3 lives, an embattled CEO, a fearless woman, and a boy fighting illness, sat together, fragile but bound by sacrifice. Night fell, and the hospital grew still. In the quiet room, Noah sketched the 3 of them under a window. Raina tucked the blanket around him, her eyes still wary after years of hardship. Brian stood by the window, gazing at the endless lights of Chicago. For a lifetime, he had believed power and wealth were the only fortress against abandonment. But tonight, amidst antiseptic air and a boy's half-finished drawings, he saw the truth. That fortress had only left him more alone. He turned, voice low but resolute. Raina, Noah, I've lived in fear of loss all my life, and that fear nearly cost me everything. I won't repeat that mistake. I promise, not only to protect Carter Innovations, but to protect you both. Whatever it takes. Raina blinked, her dark eyes searching for deception. Do you understand what that means? My brother doesn't need pretty words. He needs someone who stays, who doesn't run when it gets hard. Brian stepped forward, pulling from his pocket an old handkerchief embroidered Catherine Carter, the only relic of his mother. He placed it beside Raina's pen. Two relics, side by side. I understand. I thought this handkerchief was the end of my childhood. But today, beside this pen, I see it as a beginning. Family isn't always born of blood. It's forged through brave choices. Noah's tired but radiant smile brightened. So from now on, we're family? Brian's chest eased for the first time in years. If you'll have me, yes, we are family. I won't be perfect, but I'll be here. I won't leave again. Hermana, Reina was silent for a long time. At last she nodded. Not full forgiveness, but the fragile beginning of trust. In that small hospital room, three fragmented lives wove together. And Brian's new promise, simple yet unbreakable, became the red thread binding them, leading into an uncertain future, but for the first time one filled with hope.